It's 2 p.m. on Monday, November 17th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. The stories we are following at this hour. Pretty terse is how the top U.S. intelligence official describes his recent dinner with the North Korean officials. Pyongyang, in the meantime, sends Choe Ryong-hae as a special envoy to Russia. A video showing the beheading of another American aid worker has been released by Islamic State militants. U.S. President Barack Obama condemns it as an act of pure evil. And Japan slips into recession after showing a surprising on-year contraction of 1.6% in third quarter gross domestic product. Now, James Clapper, America's top intelligence official who recently visited North Korea, has talked about his trip to U.S. media outlets. He says North Korean officials didn't seem very happy about the fact that his visit didn't result in a breakthrough in terms of bilateral relations between Washington and Pyongyang. Kwon So-ah starts us off.
U.S. Director of National Intelligence James Clapper's trip to North Korea was a success in that he freed 2 American detainees there and crossed visiting the communist state off his professional bucket list. But the trip was apparently not as satisfying on North Korea's end. Clapper told CBS News in an interview over the weekend that North Korea seemed to be disappointed with the trip as there was no diplomatic breakthrough as a result. Clapper says the short letter he carried with him from President Barack Obama mostly stated that it would be received as a positive gesture to free American detainees Kenneth Bae and Matthew Miller. Clapper said the tone of the dinner he had with officials was pretty terse and that this atmosphere kept him apprehensive on whether he would be allowed to bring the captives back to the States. During talks on human rights, officials told him they don't want Washington kicking up a fuss about the issue. Clapper said officials in Pyongyang criticized the U.S. for attempting to intervene in their internal matters. He added that he got the impression the North felt it was under siege. The intelligence chief, however, also encountered a different tone on the sidelines when an official who appeared to be in his 40s expressed interest in Clapper visiting again in the future. Clapper said this seemed to embody the generational divide between the younger and older officials in the North Korean regime. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
North Korea's senior ruling Workers' Party official Choe Ryong-hae embarks on a week-long trip to Russia this Monday as a special envoy. Choe is expected to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow on Tuesday when they will likely discuss strengthening the two countries' ties and economic cooperation. Now, he is expected to deliver a letter from leader Kim Jong-un, and attention is being drawn to whether Choe's trip could be a precursor for the North Korean leader visiting Russia for a bilateral summit with Putin. Analysts say this is Pyongyang's way of coping with the deteriorating relationship with its traditional ally China, and Moscow's way of looking for other supporters as it continues to be blamed for its role in the Ukraine crisis. And speaking of the Sino-North Korean ties, they were once rosy but are said to have gotten worse since Kim Jong-un assumed power in the north a few years ago. Now, one of the indications of this is a multi-million-dollar bridge which was supposed to boost trade between the two countries but remains closed well after its scheduled opening date. Park Ji-won tells us more.
This is the new Yalu River Bridge, linking the northeastern Chinese city of Tandong to North Korea's border city of Sinŭiju. The 3-kilometer-long structure was scheduled to open late last month, but Chinese state media reports the opening has been pushed back indefinitely. China footed the entire cost of the $350 million project, expecting the bridge to boost bilateral trade. But after 4 years of work, facilities and roads linking the bridge into the border cities remain unfinished. Satellite images taken in September also show that North Korea hasn't started building customs facilities. Compared to pictures taken in October of last year, we see no improvements at all. In fact, some buildings have been torn down during the time.
China and North Korea delayed laying roads linking the bridge to the cities because Beijing is not happy with Pyongyang's nuclear programs, and North Korea is unhappy with its current relationship with Beijing. I don't think the bridge will open until the latter half of next year.
Watchers say the hold-up completing the bridge, which was supposed to handle some 80% of goods passing between both countries, reflects the sour relations between the once strong allies. Park Geunhye, ARIRANG News.
Now, Washington says U.S. forces Japan will automatically be deployed to the Korean Peninsula in the event of a contingency without prior consultation with Tokyo. Citing a statement released by the U.S. State Department, Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency reported Monday that Washington is prepared to carry out all obligations under its bilateral security treaty and joint operational plans with South Korea. The statement contradicts Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's remarks at a parliamentary session in July, where he said U.S. forces Japan must seek Tokyo's understanding before sending Marines to the Korean Peninsula. Now, U.S. President Barack Obama has condemned it as an act of pure evil. Islamic State militants have released another video showing the decapitated head of a man confirmed to be 26-year-old aid worker Peter Kasich. Now, he was a former U.S. soldier who returned to the region to help refugees through his aid group, Sarah. He was captured by militants in Syria last October, and President Barack Obama honored the Muslim convert who also went by the name Abdul Rahman Kasich as a humanitarian who worked to save the lives of Syrians injured and dispossessed by the Syrian conflict, unlike IS, whom he said was bent only on sowing death and destruction. Smart homes are one of the most promising areas in the Internet of Things, in which everything we touch and interact with is connected to the World Wide Web. At first, companies were quick to hook up home appliances to the net, but now they're exploring products that are not traditionally electronic, like furniture. Here's our Kim Ji-yeon with this week's Industry Insight.
Korea's largest telecommunications operator, SK Telecom, has partnered up with the country's #2 furniture maker, Hyundai to produce smart furniture. The devices will allow users to enjoy multimedia content from applications downloaded on a wireless network and will be available on both the iOS and Android operating systems. SK Telecom says it's the first company in the world to create smart furniture, and the development is in line with its goal of providing better smart home services amid the Internet of Things, where objects are being increasingly connected to the web.
We thought that connecting the furniture most commonly used by homemakers would be a great way to expand the market of the Internet of Things, because they're mainly going to be the ones using smart home services.
For example, users of this kitchen shelf can check produce prices or look up a recipe while listening to the radio. The shelf is also compatible with existing smart home devices that open or lock the front door and control room temperature. But these devices are not just for users who spend most of their time at home.
This is one of my personal favorites, the dressing table. It's very convenient for workers like me who have to get up and rush to the office every morning. I can quickly check the latest news and my schedule while I do my hair and makeup. And there's sensors embedded in the mirrors, which are touchscreen. So it's also Bluetooth enabled, so I can receive and make calls or listen to my music using my smartphone.
The development of other kinds of furniture, including smart beds and sofas, is also underway. Smart furniture will be available for commercial use by the end of this year and will be released to the public next year. SK Telecom and Hyundai Lavar say they hope to raise $45 million in sales of smart furniture by the year 2017. And the climate for their business looks bright due to the rising demand for smart home devices. Back in January, the CEO of U.S. tech giant Cisco Systems, John Chambers, said he saw the Internet of Things as a $19 trillion opportunity. The U.S.-based Consumer Electronics Association predicts sales of smart home devices will increase to nearly 36 million gadgets in 2017 from the current 3 million. Kim Jeon, ARIRANG News.
In the year 2012 for Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul.
Shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. President Park Geunhye is now back on Korean soil after attending this year's APEC summit and G20 meeting. Now, during the 9-day trip, the president finalized 2 free trade negotiations. ARIRANG's presidential office correspondent Choe Ryong-hae has more.
Following a 2.5-year tug-of-war, President Park Geunhye meeting her Chinese counterpart on the sidelines of the APEC Beijing summit announced the conclusion of Korea-China FTA negotiations.
글로벌 경기 회복이 지연되고 저성장 국면이 지속되고 있는 세계 경제에도 반가운 소식이 될 것이라고 생각합니다.
By finalizing a free trade deal with its biggest trading partner, Korea hopes to reduce $5.4 billion in annual tariffs and to accelerate entry into China's consumer goods and domestic markets. Another long-awaited deal, Korea's FTA with New Zealand, was finalized and announced by the 2 countries' leaders on the sidelines of the G20 Brisbane summit. Korea has secured a greater voice in multilateral trade talks, having concluded FTAs with 10 out of the 12 countries participating in the U.S.-led Free Trade Network, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and 16 of 21 Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation members. On the diplomatic front, President Park maintained a balance in relations with Korea's key partnering nations, talking about ways to boost cooperation on the North Korean nuclear issue with both of the G2 leaders. She also sought ways to thaw relations with Tokyo, agreeing with her Japanese counterpart to move forward on talks over resolving Japan's wartime sex slavery of Korean women and expressing hopes for a trilateral leaders summit with China and Japan.
영내의 평화와 번영에 기여하는 길은 바로 이와 같은 실질적 협력을 강화하는 것이라고 생각합니다.
And lastly, at the G20 summit, the Korean leaders' growth strategy by way of social reforms, deregulation, and support for the creative industries received the highest grade among the G20 nations. Choe Ryong-hae, ARIRANG News.
The Shanghai-Hong Kong Stock Connect program opened up on this Monday. Global investors who previously had no access poured money into China's stock market on the first day of trading. However, some analysts here in Seoul are concerned that it's going to have a negative impact on the Korean market. Son Jang-in has this report.
China's Shanghai stock market is opening to foreign investors for the first time since it was launched 24 years ago. It's not a full opening, but the new trading link between the Shanghai and Hong Kong bourses will allow international investors eyeing Chinese stocks greater access to the market. From Monday, they will be able to buy and sell over 550 of the largest A-grade shares listed in Shanghai directly via the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Until now, only institutional investors with a secured quota from the Chinese government could invest directly in China's domestic markets, but the new scheme is going to make foreign investment in the mainland a lot easier. And the overseas investors are already flocking in.
Around 150,000 people opened investment accounts in just one day. We expect more security agencies to open accounts for their clients over the next few days.
China's finance ministry announced that foreign investors will enjoy personal income tax exemptions on profits from investments through the Connect program for the next 3 years. Korean analysts say the move will negatively impact the domestic stock market and they've expressed concerns about possible capital outflows to China. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
Now, Japan, the world's third largest economy, has slipped into recession after recording negative growth for the second straight quarter this year. The country's gross domestic product during the July to September period shrank 0.4% from the previous quarter and 1.6% rather on year. Japan had previously projected economic recovery in the third quarter. 2.2% was the market estimate. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has said he would use the third quarter growth figures to decide whether to delay an increase in the consumption tax rate to 10%. A hike from 5 to 8% in April affected growth in the second quarter. Now, the proportion of Korea's exports to Japan has dropped to a record low this year, with most of the blame being pointed to the weakening Japanese yen. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
The tumbling Japanese yen is weighing on Korean exporters trying to sell their products to the country. Data from Statistics Korea shows exports to Japan in the January to September period this year stood at roughly $24.5 billion, accounting for 5.7% of all Korean exports. That ratio is the lowest recorded since the agency started to compile such data in 1966. During the same period, exports to China took up around 25%, while the United States made up 12%. And Korean exports to Japan has been on a downward spiral for the past 3 years. Watchers attribute the drop to Korea's move to diversify its export markets and to the falling yen, which was triggered by the Japanese government's aggressive stimulus measures. The yen has lost a third of its value against the greenback since the end of 2012. The weak yen trend strengthens the price competitiveness of Japanese exporters and normally raises Korea's imports from Japan, but that has not happened yet. Experts say that's because of Japanese exporters that are not actively cutting their prices on the back of the weak yen and Korea's sluggish domestic demand that is slowing Korea's overall imports. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
With 94% of Korean office workers owning a smartphone, Korea has topped the list of 25 countries Expedia has surveyed. The U.S.-based travel agent says Korea was followed by Mexico, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Thailand. Japan recorded the lowest rate at just over 50%. While Koreans had the highest rate of owning other gadgets, such as a laptop along with their smartphones, the survey found that the companies they work for do not provide the gadgets and that they generally pay for the devices out of their own pockets. In fact, less than a fifth of Koreans surveyed said their company had supplied them with their smartphone. Korea is taking inspiration from other countries in a bid to turn itself into a gateway for global food exports in Northeast Asia. The $500 million project is expected to provide a new source of economic growth and job creation. Our Kim Min-ji has this next story.
Korea has set its sights on the food industry as a new growth engine for the economy and is seeking to develop itself into a hub for the Northeast Asian food market. The Korea National Food Cluster, or Food Palace as it's called, is part of the Korean government's plan to build a food industrial complex that will facilitate business and research activities and become a convenient gateway for global exports. Located in Iksan, Jeollabuk-do province, the site is near major air and seaports and can be easily accessed by the capital via bullet train. And with its proximity to major markets like China and Japan, the government expects the $500 million project to have a substantial economic impact.
The Korea National Food Cluster is expected to generate over $13 billion in sales, facilitate $3 billion in exports, and create 22,000 new jobs a year when it reaches full operation in 2020.
The government has so far signed agreements with over 100 local and foreign companies and plans to lure more businesses and investors with incentives such as tax exemptions and state subsidies.
While the European food market has been on the decline, the Northeast Asian market, with a population of 1.5 billion, is expected to emerge as a new major food market, accounting for over 30% of the global industry. The government says that with the initiative, it will create an environment for potential investors to use food policy as a springboard for international expansion. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
Tteokbokki, one of the most popular street foods in Korea, has been evolving over the years and is now even considered a full meal for some. It's also become the theme for a new art exhibition, and our Im Yoon-hee is here to share it with us. Good afternoon, Yoon-hee. So just when you thought tteokbokki had a limit.
Right, so surprise, a gallery all about tteokbokki. So today I have a couple galleries to look at, but the first takes a look at Sindang-dong, also known as Tteokbokki Town. Take a look.
Rows of machines and thread. Before tteokbokki became famous, Sindang-dong was known for its sewing and the tons and tons of clothes it produced. Today, it's famous for some of the best tteokbokki in the nation, but the history of the street has a lot more than just rice cakes. A few of the citizens who have spent over half their lives at Sindang-dong now share their stories of the tteokbokki street, and the tools and materials used by some of the original shops now illustrate the spicy history. For some, art is more than just a pastime. It's a source of healing and communication. Young artists from around the nation have teamed up with handicapped children to create unique works of art. Pop artist Art Gnome, known for his lovable characters, wants to share the practice of art with others, especially with these children.
My wish is that time spent drawing is not boring, but instead interactive and playful.
My child is complimented while communicating with others, and so she feels a sense of accomplishment.
It's a special opportunity for all of these young artists to work with a master in the field, and also to put their talents on display for the rest of the community to enjoy.
So the latest artist that we just saw, the last artist we saw, Art Gnome, he's pretty popular here, his characters too.
Right, so his little cartoon characters are very popular. So actually, he's known for his blending unique characteristics of folk paintings with his very contemporary style. And so he actually says he gets inspiration from folk paintings, but especially from folk paintings that commoners would hang on their doors for special occasions or for gifts for people. So he takes those characters and he blends it with this modern technique. But he says that happiness and hope are common motifs with these folk paintings, and you can definitely see evidence of that in all of his work.
And Sindang-dong, of course, it's an area with somewhat of a rich history in Seoul, and the residents there are very proud of their neighborhood.
Right. So a very interesting neighborhood, especially if most people go nowadays for tteokbokki. But you know, the earliest, they actually boast that they sold the earliest tteokbokki here, the modern form of tteokbokki here in Korea. And so some of the families have been there for decades, and so they actually have taken interviews and contributed their stories to this gallery. So if you go there, you really get a personal sense of the history of Sindang-dong and tteokbokki there.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Junie, for today's story. That's unfortunately all the time that we have for today. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Happy Monday, everyone. I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. All of the rain has cleared and the sun is out nationwide, but strong winds are expected, so things will feel much cooler today. Now, dry weather conditions continue as well, with the dry weather alert in effect over in the east coastal regions and in both Gyeongsang-do provinces as well. Now, although we started off with a cold morning, temperatures are on the rise with some regions topping out into the teens. However, we'll cool back down this evening, and by tomorrow, Seoul can expect lows below the freezing point. And to our readings for today, Seoul will peak at 11 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will peak to 13 and 16 degrees. And to other regions, Jeju peaks to 14, while Dokdo is a bit lower at 10, while Nangkung will be a bit hotter at 12 degrees. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and have a wonderful day.
And that's all we have for you at this hour. Our next newscast is at 4 p.m. Korea time. I'll see you then.